Westminster Abbey is a flagship institution. It's right there at the centre of national life in this country.
Westminster Abbey is the coronation church.
The Abbey has been the place where people commemorate the great men and women of our history.
Here was the origins of Parliament.
I think of the Abbey as being an upbeat place.
The most unusual phone call was from Michelle Obama's Secret Service.
On a standard day, we would probably process 1,000 people per hour.
Even though we are a massive tourist attraction, we still are very much a living church.
Westminster Abbey represents faith at the heart of the nation.
To think that there have been people with their eyes turned in the same direction towards worship of God in this place for over 1,000 years.
There's a feeling of a really Rolls-Royce musical setup here.
Being the Queen's choristers, we really can't afford to let her down.
Quite a lot I see people crying.
When you sing, it brings tears of joy and sadness.
I do wake up every day and think this is a fantastic place to be.
It's a thrill, even after 17 years.
You believe you've got that to look after.
There's a tremendous sense of being part of something that goes back all those hundreds of years.
It's a magnificent building. I feel like I'm part of history just being here.
Boys, here, come forward just a little bit for me. Lovely, now I can see you. Now I'm going to have the Dean and Chapter in the middle, you see, so you're not to join up, boys, OK?
Founded by Catholic monks in 960 AD, a church has stood in London on the banks of the Thames for over 1,000 years. Today it's no longer a monastery and employs 250 staff and 500 volunteers to support 1,500 services and over 1 million visitors a year.
Boys, best smile out, OK? Here we go, looking to me. Thank you very much. Lovely, that was the one for the police. Now the Inland Revenue.
The history of the Abbey reflects the history of Britain and the seismic rift in the 16th century between Catholics and Protestants. This summer, the Abbey will be making a historic trip to the Vatican to help heal this centuries-old divide.
For 1,500 years, the church in England was part of the Greater Western Church, the Roman Catholic Church. And then 500 years ago, it broke away immediately over the divorce of King Henry VIII, but then the Elizabethan settlement under Queen Elizabeth. There was huge persecution on both sides. The Catholic Queen Mary persecuted Protestants. So this division took place in great rancor and anger. But we never quite lost faith in each other. We never stopped seeing each other as churches.
Over the past 50 years, there has been a slow thawing of relations between the Church of England and the Vatican. In 2010, Benedict XVI became the first pope to make a state visit to a British monarch.
The congregation here represents the whole of Christianity in these islands.
And the first pope in history to set foot in Westminster Abbey.
When the Pope came here for the papal visit, one of the things that was completely evident to me, and I think to all of us, is that he loved the music. And he was obviously very, very impressed with the quality of music that he saw here. What we never imagined at the time was that it would result in an invitation to the choir to go and sing at the papal mass in St. Peter's Church on St. Peter's Day. Now that is extraordinary.
The trip to Rome has added significance because St. Peter, the first pope, is also the Abbey's patron saint.
How many of you have been to Rome before? Ben?
The man spearheading the visit is the Abbey's spiritual leader, the Dean. He's come to the choir school to talk to the boys.
This is a thing that has never, ever, ever happened before. What you need to bear in mind is that one of the great pains for us as Christians is our division from one another. We love one another, and it's important that we show respect for each other's traditions, and that out of the pain of separation, we pray for the peace of reconciliation. So our sense of being separate is a pain. It's hard for us. But we ought, in that sense of deprivation, to be praying for the gift of reconciliation. And out of all that will grow a great visit, and much more than that, will advance us together on that great road towards Christian unity. Okay? So you're engaged in a mission of vastly greater importance than you can possibly imagine.
Hello, come in.
Good morning.
Good morning. How nice to see you.
And you.
Jonathan Milton.
Hello. This is George.
Come on in, George.
The Abbey Choir School teaches up to 36 boarders between the ages of 8 and 13. During term time, they sing 8 services every week. The standard is high, and throughout the year, the master of the choristers, James O'Donnell, holds auditions for new recruits.
Voice trial is a rather kind of awful name, really, for a series of auditions, and they're designed to establish whether a 7-year-old boy has what it takes to be a chorister here. I am looking for somebody who's got a reasonably good way of already expressing themselves through their voice, through their singing voice. I'm looking for somebody who's got a bit of a get up and go as well, a bright spark, somebody with a bit of resilience, maybe a slightly quirky sense of humour or something about them that isn't going to mean they're going to stand there like a pudding and receive instructions and just reproduce them mechanically. I want somebody who's going to engage. OK, lovely. OK, so can you see the music there? Why don't you just take a step back so that I can really hear you properly? Good, chap. So here's a little introduction.
George is just one of around 25 boys auditioned over the course of a year for a possible 6 places.
About a year ago, we met someone who had a nephew at the school, and so we looked it up on the website, and we came to the open day. And it all started then, really. I mean, as we came out, he said very seriously, having been taken off while we were talking to the headmaster, he'd been taken off by some of the older boys, staying in the dormitories and the other things. And as he came out, he said very quietly, I want to go to that school. He hasn't changed his mind since. And any boy who spent 5 years here, as a matter of routine, producing something which is outstanding every day, as good as it gets probably anywhere in the world, must learn the lesson that practice pays and do something properly and you get the results.
OK, if I play you 3 notes at once, you think you can sing those, OK? I'm sure you can. Just listen. It's all about just what you hear, OK? Good. Yes, do you recognise that sound? Do you know what it's called? What we call that chord? Doesn't matter if you don't. What do you call a bicycle with 3 wheels?
Tricycle.
A tricycle. And this is called a, does it ring a bell?
Triad.
That's it. Triad, because it's got 3 notes. That's all it is. OK, it's not exactly complicated. Good. What about this triad?
If George is selected, he'll start in September and spend his next 5 years singing at a professional level in a choir that performs for an incredible range of congregations that include royalty, statesmen, and the world's religious leaders. Today, the Abbey is welcoming one of the world's great spiritual leaders, the Dalai Lama.
It seemed to me that it was important in itself to welcome the Dalai Lama here, that it would be a statement of our interest in the plight of the people of Tibet and the people in exile with the Dalai Lama, but more particularly it's a chance to recognize that he is a world figure promoting peace and reconciliation and mutual understanding, and that we could work with him. And we recognize that the Abbey has a worldwide significance, and therefore what we do can be exemplary and can encourage people in other places as well.
Your Holiness, it's a real delight and a pleasure to welcome you back to Westminster after almost 30 years. My beloved brothers and sisters, we gather from many Christian and faith traditions in this holy place for a moment of reflection and prayer. On behalf of the Dean and Chapter, I warmly welcome you all.
Respected spiritual leaders and spiritual brothers and sisters, once more, we find this opportunity in magnificent Church or chapel. People from different religious faith sit together and I think pray together. It's really wonderful.
Establishing good relationships with people of different religious traditions, whether it be other Christian traditions, as with the Roman Catholics, or other religions, as with the Dalai Lama here, all of those are very important things for the Abbey to be involved in, I think, and this visit to Rome takes its part within that broader business of being friendly towards ecumenism and being friendly towards people of other faiths altogether. That's part of what we want to do, and it's part of our mission.
Fantastic. That's absolutely wonderful. Extraordinary man. Extraordinary man. Really great. Good. Thank you very much, everyone.
Organising the historic 5-day tour to Italy is the responsibility of Minor Canon Jamie Hawkey.
Salve, buonasera. Posso parlare Monsignor Mark Langham? It's quite unusual to be organising something away from the Abbey. Most of our work here as minor canons is in organising services that people will come to here. So we're extremely used to internal liaison and to external liaison with outside agencies, outside individuals, people who are going to come here for a special service. But it's quite unique to be organising something that not only is not in the Abbey and not in England, but in Italy. This isn't just the Abbey Choir going out to do a big concert in a concert hall. This is the Abbey Choir singing at a papal mass, at the mass which is one of the biggest occasions in the Vatican calendar.
7 weeks before the trip to Rome, the Sistine Chapel Choir is in London. In recognition of the importance of the Pope's invitation, they've come to the Abbey for a rehearsal.
Giorgio, mettiti nel tuo posto, dai.
The Pope has stipulated what he wants from the two choirs together. He wants the Missa Pape Marcelli by Palestrina, which is one of the most famous settings of the Mass ever composed.
Both choirs have sung the music many times before, so the challenge for the conductors, James O'Donnell and Monsignor Massimo Palambella, is to integrate their very different sounds.
The Sistine Chapel Choir has its own tradition which goes back many centuries, and of course inevitably they develop their own style of singing, and inevitably we have developed our own style of singing, which comes partly from the language we speak. They sing almost entirely Latin music. They sing in a very much bigger building, which means that quite a lot of their music is perhaps less complicated rhythmically, and they have a very direct sound. We have a slightly more demure approach. Good afternoon, and can I welcome to London our colleagues from Rome. It's very exciting to be singing with you.
At the beginning of the cradle. Ta 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 ta, in diminuire il ta 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 ta. Let's try.
For James O'Donnell, who himself is a Roman Catholic, the visit has a personal as well as a professional resonance.
To sing in Rome with the Sistine Chapel Choir at a papal mass is going to be one of the most amazing moments of my life, I think.
I'm really looking forward to singing to the Pope again, and I'm also really looking forward to seeing the Vatican and the Sistine Chapel, which I don't think I would ever have seen otherwise.
Seeing the Pope again, that would be quite cool. I remember when the Pope came to the Abbey. Yeah, that was quite a big opening ceremony. This is going to be even bigger.
I'm really excited about the whole prospect. The Pope inviting us is going to be amazing.
"19 boys and 12 professional singers, along with the music department, the dean, several members of the clergy and the press office. A total of 44 people will make the trip to Italy. The Abbey's governing body, the dean and chapter, has decided that the cost of the tour will be met by the Abbey itself. The man in charge of balancing the books is the Canon Treasurer, Robert Rees.
You can't have an ancient medieval building like this without it costing you quite a lot of money to look after it. It costs about £11 million a year to run Westminster Abbey, and 9/10 of our income comes from the charges at the door. I think it's very important to say that we never, ever charge for coming to services. They are and will always remain free, so we're not charging people to come and worship. But if people are coming here as tourists to look at a place of very considerable historical attraction, we really have no choice but to charge them because we'd have no other way of raising that money.
My role is Head of Visitor Services and responsible for the sort of 1.2 million paying visitors last year, as well as the 600,000 worshippers that come into the Abbey every year. On a standard day, we would probably process 1,000 people per hour. We have quite a short space of time to get people in because of our statutory services. We open the doors around 9:30 most mornings, and we need to be closing by 3:30, so it's quite a short day. And during that time, we would put 6,000 people through on a standard day. It can be more, and it can be less, but 1,000 people an hour is a very good rule of thumb that we use here.
Just statue by the gate, there's Robert Peel, who founded the Metropolitan Police. And from his first name, Robert, short name, Robert is Bobby. Yes, so you didn't know, now you know. The London Bobby, British Bobby, so called after Robert Peel.
The number isn't necessarily reflective of the demand. It's actually controlled by how many people we can physically get into the building at any one time, making sure that A, it's safe for people to still enter, and B, that the people inside are still getting the best possible visit. It can at times feel very busy in the Abbey, but we make sure that people are still getting the most out of visiting us. So we don't have a sort of open revolving door policy. There are times when we have to slow things down just to make sure that the people inside are getting the best possible experience.
Excuse me, sir, there's no photography permitted inside?
Last year we were phenomenally busy, thanks to the royal wedding. Actually, we were phenomenally busy from the minute the royal engagement was announced. We started picking up. The 2 weeks after the royal wedding, the place was absolutely packed.
Hello, can I help you at all?
I was just asking where Catherine walked down the aisle, through here.
Well, she came through the big door. On the royal wedding day, I had to press the bell to signal to the bell ringers to make sure that they started the bells at the correct time when she exits, because we always make sure that when they come to the door right at the end of the wedding that the bells are ringing perfectly at the right time. So part of my job was to make sure that to communicate, we have a little Morse code button, because of course they're up in the bell tower, and I have a little button to press to make sure they start at the right time. That altar wasn't there, so it was moved to, it's movable.
Oh, I see.
She didn't hop over it.
No, I didn't know she went around it or what she did.
No, that's staging, and the altar can be moved, and we do that for all our big services.
Oh, right.
Then, as you can see,
Molly Johnston is one of 20 marshals employed by the Abbey to ensure the smooth running and safety of its million-plus visitors.
hello, do you need any help at all? Everyone says there's no 2 days the same, and it's absolutely true. One day you're at a royal wedding, the next day President Obama's here, but then I'll be doing something completely different. I'll be interacting with the public, I'll be directing somebody to the bathroom, I'll be answering a question about a carving on a wall.
You got kings and queens buried here. You've got musicians and poets buried here.
The Abbey itself is just somewhere that just captures Britain through the years.
Edward is actually interred up here in a shrine. His full body in its entirety is within that shrine.
I wouldn't call it like a religious experience, so to speak, but it's as close as you can get, I think.
Tourism is the Abbey's lifeblood, and the most senior priest in charge of visitor welcome is known as the Canon Steward. In 2005, Jane Hedges became the first woman to be appointed to the role.
Obviously, if you're lucky enough to be a canon in Westminster Abbey, I do wake up every day and think, well, you know, this is a fantastic place to be. And I suppose for me as well, that tremendous sort of extraordinary feeling, gosh, I'm the first woman to be here in this position. And it's a historic moment. And when I was appointed, there had been a feeling at that stage that it would be good to have a woman canon here. So although it is a very male place, and it is, at a symbolic level, it's really rather important that there are men and women working together, and to recognise that women have got as many gifts as men, and therefore that they should be able to exercise them at all levels of leadership within the Church of England.
Do follow me.
Canon Hedges' role is based on a tradition that was established here in 960 AD, when the Abbey was founded as a community of monks who lived according to the rule of the Italian saint Benedict.
In 1540, Henry VIII dissolved the monastery here, you know, as was happening all over the country. But interestingly, once the abbey was re-established as it is today, as a collegiate church with a dean and chapter, some of the roles that have been taken on within the Benedictine tradition were retained. And it's the role of the canon steward today to make sure that everybody receives Benedictine hospitality. Benedict himself talked about receiving anybody that came to the monastery as if it was Christ himself.
So we're just off to our volunteers' lunch, which we hold annually because we are so lucky here. We've got around about 170 people who help out in the Abbey and welcome our visitors. And of course, one of the really important things about being a welcoming community is that not only do we make sure that people get a welcome as they get to the Abbey, but also as they're leaving, that we make sure that they're happy and that they know where they're going next. And so this group of people are fantastic. 170 of them be coming to lunch today, and it's an opportunity for us to say thank you to them for all that they offer to the life of the Abbey. There have been some very lovely things happening this year, apart from all the things to do with work. And I'd like, on your behalf, to offer our congratulations to Stephen, who got married a few weeks ago. And that's really lovely. But also love is obviously in the air because, of course, Molly got engaged. One of the amazing things at the Abbey, last year we had over 1.25 million people paying to come in and go on a tour. We have just a handful of letters of complaint, and I think that that's fantastic that we have so few when we're dealing with so many people, and that's largely down to the work that you're doing alongside our wonderful marshals and vergers. So, as I say, on behalf of the Dean and Chapter, I would like to say a very, very big thank you to all of you.
The Abbey is always looking for new ways to welcome their visitors. And to keep up with the demands of modern tourism, they embarked last year on their biggest building project for 20 years. The man in charge is the secular head of the Abbey and former private secretary to Prince Charles, Sir Stephen Lamport.
The Solarium project is really important for us because it's been important over the centuries that Benedictine monasteries can look after their visitors properly. At the moment, they have a coffee shop in the North Cloister, which is in the open air. It's cold, it's drafty, you know, it's wet when it's raining, there's nowhere properly to sit, there's no running water. I mean, we make do with that in terms of offering people refreshment. This project enables us to do something much, much more than that, which is much more in tune with our traditions. Now, what we're looking at the moment is what is called the Solarium, which was the old monastic store for food and drink. This will hold about probably 70 covers, 70 people will be able to sit here. They'll have a chance to eat and drink, I mean, good quality, modestly priced food is the objective. We're going to go down through here now. You'll see these great beams here. This actually was originally a flat roof behind the chapter office. This is going to house a second part of the solarium, probably I think to accommodate about 50 people. This will give you views to the east over the Victoria Tower of Parliament, and wonderful views across to the west towers, the Hawksmoor Towers of the Abbey. So you will have this remarkable context in which to eat and to drink. The plan is that keeping up the momentum, and the chaps are working extremely hard at this, they're doing 12-hour shifts. We are hoping and planning this will be very much open in time for the Olympics.
The project is behind schedule because the builders came across medieval archaeological finds which interrupted the works.
I was quite amazed by some of the findings. In the solarium area, they found an actual cold store cellar. We thought it was a well, but it turns out it was actually used for keeping meats and produce cold. It's an old brick well in the floor that no one knew was there. We had to do some exploratory work around the footings, and I was amazed to see oyster shells and fish bones there. We thought someone had put them in as a bit of a joke. It's actually in underneath there, so every shovelful there's history.
As well as unforeseeable delays, the builders have to work around the Abbey's routine of daily services and the great landmarks of the Christian calendar. Today is Pentecost, 50 days after Christ's resurrection on Easter Sunday. It marks the moment when the Holy Spirit descended on St. Peter and the other apostles, empowering them to spread the word of Christ.
Well, here we are. We see the apostles, probably John, I should think, in the middle, and Peter there on his right. And you can see the tongues of flame distributed on their heads. And above, the Spirit as a dove coming down and inspiring them. And they went out, and Peter preached confidently to all the people who were gathered there from all over the Jewish world and Gentiles as well in Jerusalem. And that day, 3,000 people were baptized. So it's the beginning of the church.
Pentecost has really caught the imagination of composers. It's a very dramatic feast. It's full of a sort of sense of a sort of surge of power, of God's power coming through the church, through the world. So the music can reflect that and pick up on those themes.
For Pentecost, James O'Donnell has chosen a piece of music that was written in Latin by an English composer, Thomas Tallis, during the Reformation in the 16th century.
The use of Latin liturgically was very much a bone of contention at the Reformation. Latin was seen to be a very distant language, which made the words spoken only accessible to those who were learned and had studied it. It's only quite recently that places like Westminster Abbey have been able to perform this sort of music because of its Latin text and the insistence that liturgical music in the Church of England should be sung in English. And in fact, a few years ago, if you wanted to do this music, you would have had to translate the text and sing it in English.
This new openness to using Latin in Anglican church music is a sign of increasing dialogue with other faith traditions.
The greatest church in the world is St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, which is where St. Peter himself is buried. We'll be making a pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Peter, just as the Pope made a pilgrimage from Rome to Westminster to the shrine of St. Edward. So it'll be, as it were, a return match, and it'll be a marvellous occasion for us. We'll also be going to Monte Cassino, to the shrine of St. Benedict. So it's very exciting.
We're just coming up to the last few days before we go to Rome, and I'm just taking the time to revise some of the rehearsal we did a few weeks ago, both with the Sistine Chapel Choir and also our own preparations, and trying to just go back over certain things that emerged in our rehearsal together. Some of us are singing Tibi Dabo Claves in a rather English way. It's going to have to be Tibi Dabo Claves Reni, and particularly cellorum. Not cellorum. Don't let the vowel be plummy. We're actually going to sing several settings of the text Tu es Petrus, or Thou art Peter, you are Peter, which is a setting of the biblical passage where Jesus says to Peter, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. OK, so you need to watch me. Right. There we are. That's just proved my point. And then we wait another two. This is obviously an absolutely critical text for the papacy, for the Feast of St. Peter, which we're going to be singing in Rome, and even in the Abbey, we would have been singing a setting of Tu es Petrus on that feast. Then that's it. You just have to be sensitive to how they want to do that.
Taking part in high-profile events is the business of the Abbey. None have been more spectacular than the marriage of Prince William to Catherine Middleton. But moments like these are punctuated by more private celebrations.
Martin's at the front of the procession, the Dean, Piper, Carol and your father.
The man organising the trip to Rome, Jamie Hawkey, has a big event of his own to arrange. When he gets back, he'll be marrying his fiancée, Carol Ripley. They'll be the first couple to take their vows at the high altar since the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge.
You turn your right hand over. No, Carol's right. Sorry. You're the priest, you should know this by now.
I just had a blank. I think whoever's getting married, whether it's a royal wedding or a wedding like ours or a wedding at Gretna Green with 2 witnesses, it's the same sacrament. It's the same utterly simple bond of 2 people pledging, covenanting their life together.
Jamie, you lead Carol across.
Mm-hmm. So I take this hand.
That's perfect.
So much of what we do at the Abbey is really based on precedent. And the precedent for minor canons when they get married while they're here is that they marry in the Abbey at the high altar. And it's just pretty extraordinary for us.
At which point, a virgin will come from that side. He's really good at this.
Multitasking.
With a pattern.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Our wedding has involved so many members of the Abbey team who are also friends. And so we sat down here and with James O'Donnell to talk about music. We sat down with my colleague Mike to talk about how the service might work. We sat down with the Dean for wedding prep, like any other couple going to a parish priest. My dad and I, and then my dad and Carol and my mum and I went to France to get loads of the booze. Some other friends then went to do a top-up run. So it's been a brick by brick building up into what we hope is going to be a fantastic day for all our friends. We've done our very best to make sure we've covered all the bases, and we've got fantastic colleagues here who, you know, if there's a problem on the day, you just say, do you think you can go and do that? And they'll do it.
All right, Hugh, could you
make sure you put your name on it.
The Abbey party leaves in the morning for Italy. Their packed schedule includes the papal mass, a recital in the Sistine Chapel, and a pilgrimage to Monte Cassino, the heart of the Benedictine order.
No, I had 7 in my case, and now I've only got 5.
Preparing the boys for the 5-day tour is the job of the choir school matron, Maya Hill.
OK, I'm only missing 1, matron.
I've packed 19 suitcases. The 20th is mine. I haven't done that one yet.
Matron, I've got 4 pairs of socks.
You only got 4. I bought some spare ones, so if you're stuck for any, let me know, because I've got some spare. I'm sure I'll be more excited tomorrow morning. I'm a bit tired today, really. But no, it'll be lovely. It'll be a fabulous experience, and for the boys particularly, I think. I'm looking forward to visiting Monte Cassino. I remember watching a programme, when I was about their age, watching a programme about the siege of Monte Cassino and being quite fascinated by that during Second World War. So it'd be quite nice to go and visit it and see how they've rebuilt it.
We've got here, and it feels wonderful to be here, even in this heat, and we're just, as it were, on the cusp of the 2 big events, the recital in the Sistine Chapel and then the Mass with the Pope tomorrow morning. The recital is the way of the 2 choirs being able to sing in concert for the Cardinal Secretary of State and for members of the Roman Curia, as well as for the Papal Mass on the Friday morning. So it's going to be wonderful to have a concert moment together and a liturgical moment. The principal focus of this trip is the liturgical moment because we're liturgical choirs, but it's going to be wonderful to share some of our musical heritage together this evening.
It's taken 5 months planning to reach the Vatican, the heart of Roman Catholicism, where the first Bishop of Rome, St. Peter himself, is buried. The 2 choirs are meeting to rehearse in the magnificent St. Peter's Basilica, the largest Renaissance church in the world. James O'Donnell and Monsignor Massimo Palambella are sharing the conducting.
Mi è stato detto, vediamo se riuscite a fare almeno un canto insieme, perché è importante non tanto come cantate, ma che cantiate insieme. Ecco, sulla base di questo primo progetto noi abbiamo non fatto un canto insieme, abbiamo fatto tutto insieme. Severi, cosa succede? Pronti? Credevo che fosse uno di Westminster.
I think that the rehearsal showed that we had already met. I mean, I certainly felt there were very few, if any, kind of teething problems. When you know what to expect and when you're right there and you're in the place where it's going to be, the rehearsal takes a different life on and a different kind of intensity. So I think it felt as if things were on the way to having the finishing touches put to them. But you don't want to do that until the actual service. There needs to be a feeling that we haven't yet done it. And I think the sense of occasion when the congregation is there and the Pope comes in, it'll be amazing.
It was great. We had to wait quite a while to get moved around to new places. But I think it went really well, and the rehearsing, this music was really good. It's very hot.
It's all going well, rehearsal going well, and we're just having a tour of the Vatican Museum. It's great. Hot, very hot.
I love this weather. I love this weather. No, it's absolutely marvellous. It's a little bit warm for the boys, but I think we're getting used to it.
One of the ancient titles of the Bishop of Rome is Pontifex Maximus, Pontifex being a bridge. And there's absolutely no doubt that this experience is a bridge between two cultures, between two churches. And so tomorrow, when both choirs are singing at the Papal Mass, there'll be a sense in which communion is not only deepened, but on one level, communion is already achieved. Because of that common worship, a common entering into the depth of the life of God.
Father Jamie's had the lion's share of work on this tour and has done a phenomenal job at organising today's rehearsal in the Basilica, St Peter's itself. Amazing. Seeing their preparations for tomorrow's Papal Mass, to be so close to the shrine of St Peter, whom everyone agrees is the father of the church, and who's our patron saint at the Abbey. It's great. It really is an honour to be here.
And now we're just about to regroup and go into the Sistine Chapel this afternoon for a rehearsal. This morning's position's as close as we can get. We're giving a very private recital. The Secretary of State of the Vatican, who's the Pope's #2, will be here, and some of the papal household and some of the Abbey's delegation as well. So it'll be a private thing, but obviously we want it to be a memorable and a good musical experience.
The two choirs are rehearsing in the Pope's private chapel, surrounded by some of the most beautiful frescoes in Western art, painted between 1508 and 1512 by the great Michelangelo.
We've just been rehearsing for the papal concert. It's meant to be informal, but it's not that informal. And, well, it's amazing.
Glorious sound that they're making, the Sistina. I'm loving it. It's exciting, raw and gutsy.
It was marvellous. It's sort of like a bit like a dream. I had to sort of pinch myself a few times to think this is actually the Sistine Chapel that we're singing in.
It's amazing how we can merge the two sounds and make one beautiful sound. And I think singing them is a really good feeling, especially in this beautiful place.
It's much louder, and you don't need to sing loud. You just need to sing normally, and it comes out massive.
It's amazing, absolutely. I mean, it was so great, like, to see the two choirs combined and to see them sing together. It was pretty good, pretty good.
It looks like a sheet with a face on it, and that's Michelangelo. That's him.
It's amazing, thinking about Michelangelo lying on his back on scaffolding to paint this in just a couple of years.
They are tired, the heat is getting to them, getting to all of us, but they just turn it on, really, don't they? They're just great. Yeah, I was very impressed.
Tomorrow's going to be sort of one of the best days. I mean, the most tiring day. I think we come at 5:30.
The feast day of St. Peter and St. Paul is the high point of the Vatican's year, and thousands are queuing for the Mass. It will be celebrated by the successor of St. Peter, Pope Benedict.
After all these centuries, to bring a choir such as that of Westminster Abbey, which in a way epitomizes the Church of England and its role in English society, its independence, to bring that choir and that community here to Rome is an immense sign of how far we've come after all the divisions and centuries that we've been apart. It's remarkable that in the last decades we have drawn so close together that we're now able to make this gesture of friendship and recognition of each other, and this invitation is extended towards the choir and clergy of Westminster Abbey as a sign of recognition of our common baptism, how much we have in common, and that we have much more in common than what divides us. But today of all days, the feast of St. Peter and Paul, is the feast day of Rome. St. Peter and St. Paul, the great saints whose leadership the papacy is founded. And so to invite a choir and a group of clergy from a non-Catholic establishment on such a day as this to Rome, to the Pope's Basilica for his Mass, is an immensely significant gesture.
Pax Domini sit semper vobiscum. Offerte vobis pace.
At the heart of this 2.5-hour service is Holy Communion, the receiving of bread and wine, which Catholics believe to be the body and blood of Christ. For the Abbey, this is a painful moment. Non-Catholics are excluded from receiving communion because of historic, theological divisions. But this remarkable service culminates in Pope Benedict warmly greeting the Dean, together with James O'Donnell and the choir.
Right, boys, we've arrived. Can you make your way in now, please? Thank you very much.
It went well, mostly, entirely actually. And it was great to see the Pope.
It was really hot. I don't think I'll ever go to somewhere like it again.
The acoustic in that building is amazing, but with all the people in there, it's quite difficult to hear yourself.
It was amazing, but absolutely boiling.
Best buy ever, £4.
Well, I can't really express it. It was fantastic. It's sort of incredibly big theatrical event, slightly chaotic in times because there are so many people and so much to do. But culturally, really, it's a fantastic thing to be involved in. I'm rather reeling from it.
Lavorare con Westminster è stato molto cordiale. Può sembrare strano, molto semplice, cioè con James O'Donnell ci siamo intesi in un attimo. È stato molto interessante perché alla fine siamo arrivati tutti e due, abbiamo dovuto muoverci oltre i nostri confini di comprensione. Allora, questo è molto interessante perché solo se avviene questo movimento di entrambi si può trovare un terreno comune.
It was a powerful moment for me, deeply moving. I felt during communion the pain of our separation, not being able to receive communion. I think the pain of that we can offer as a small gift towards the hope of reconciliation, of full communion between us in God's good time.
The news of this historic meeting is being tweeted around the globe by the Abbey's own press team.
We've been sending out regular tweets because we've had all sorts of lovely kind of access to the Vatican behind the scenes, and we just thought it would be really interesting for everyone to see that kind of unofficial side of the visit. So, yeah, we've been on our mobile phones constantly, taking pictures and posting them and hoping that that's okay with everyone in the Vatican. It seems to be. So, and it's gone down really well. Everyone seems to be following it, particularly all our followers in North America seem to be enjoying getting those posts.
After an exhausting 3 days in Rome, the Abbey is leaving the heat and bustle of the city to embark on the last leg of their Italian tour. They've been invited to the Abbey of Monte Cassino, the burial place of St. Benedict, whose order founded Westminster Abbey.
The historic monastery of Monte Cassino, which the Allied command...
It has an added poignancy for the British group, because during the Second World War, the monastery was occupied by the German army, and after a long stalemate in 1944, the Allies destroyed the building.
The rain of high explosive completes the destruction of the monastery of Monte Cassino.
After the war, the monastery was completely rebuilt by the Italian government, and today a community of 17 Benedictine monks live here.
La regola di San Benedetto è stata sintetizzata dal motto Ora et Labora, che oggi come benedettini, oltre a tenere forte l'impegno della preghiera e del lavoro e della vita comunitaria, abbiamo anche una particolare missione che è quella dell'accoglienza e dell'ospitalità. Ecco perché abbiamo lungo la storia sviluppato una foresteria sempre più grande.
Benedict founded this order of monks in 529 AD, and this is the first time in the monastery's history that their hospitality has extended to women and children, so they've set up new quarters especially for them.
Welcome to your room.
Hugh, Joshua, come look at the view.
This teddy's name is Edward. I would normally take my other dog called Doggy, but I thought he might get left behind or I might lose him, but so I thought I'd bring him instead.
The men in the Abbey's contingent are staying in the monks' closed quarters, an area not open to women or children.
Translation would be helpful, chaps.
It's in the style of Romantic, but it's a fusion of architects.
Okay. Is this built on the same style as the previous monastery?
Yeah, it's a complete copy.
Complete copy of the previous monastery?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey.
This is fantastic. Wow, really amazing. Beautiful.
You got a bigger room than me. Awesome.
It's an accident.
You could have a proper party.
It's extraordinary. You could, yeah. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, easily a drinks party for 12 in here.
Easy. Well, it's drinks on you tonight, then. No, I was expecting a kind of white cell. You know, that's kind of what you think of the cloister rooms.
Yeah. But the thing is, lots of people get confused and think that Benedictines are like Franciscans. You know, they're not. The Benedictines don't take a vow of poverty at all. No. You know, they don't own anything themselves personally. But whereas Franciscans want, you know, that very, very simple life, for Benedictines, the vows are different. They're far more ancient. The vows of stability, conversion of life. You know.
I've never been to Monte Cassino before. I've obviously heard about it because of the battle and everything else, and it is extraordinary to be here. Not least of all to realise that this is all rebuilt after the war, after terrible bomb damage to it. And I understand all built by the state of Italy and maintained by the state of Italy. But it is the most extraordinary place. It is vast. And it is such a fabulous setting. I mean, high up on this hill, you can see why there was a warfare here, because you can see if you had big guns up here, you would command the whole of the valley up to Rome. Having now, all the time that I've been at the Abbey, been more conscious of the Benedictine tradition than I ever was before, that means a lot to me, and to realise that this is very much the heart of that whole tradition, which I think is one of the most attractive parts of the Roman Catholic whole setup. I mean, the rule of St. Benedict was very wise, was very balanced, was very sensible. It led to very remarkable communities that in themselves did some very, very good things. And the quality of the rebuilding is amazing. So full marks to the state of Italy, I think, even though they beat us at football.
There's something incredibly calming about being in a Benedictine monastery. I mean, the word written on the top of the door is pax, peace, in Latin, and that kind of sums up this place. So it's a wonderfully decompressing thing to do. And also we're singing services with a Benedictine community, and because we're at Westminster Abbey, there's something that feels right about that for us. As a choir of a place which was once a Benedictine house. So it's a wonderful final stage. The boys have been wonderful. I mean, you know, I take my hat off to them. It's my job to give them quite a hard time, and be quite demanding, and I am, but I do have enormous respect for what they've done. They've sung as well as they possibly could at every occasion, and their deportment and their conduct and their ambassadorial representation of the Abbey and what it stands for, and the choir and what that stands for, has been really good, and I will choose the right moment to make that completely clear to them.
It's St. Benedict who unites us. I spoke to the prior at lunch about the extraordinary feeling, and he said it is the gran cuore de Benedetto, the great heart of St. Benedict, who draws us together. The Rome and the Monte Cassino experience together will be forever memorable. But I believe they won't simply stand there. They stand within a stream of relationship, of developing relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England and the Anglican Communion more widely. But what is going on here is profound friendship, mutual exchange, and out of that context will eventually grow reconciliation.
In London, it's the end of the summer holidays, and at Westminster Abbey, there's a very special event taking place. The community is preparing for the wedding of one of its own, Minor Canon Jamie Hawkey to his fiancée Carol Ripley. Weddings at the High Altar are extremely rare, confined to royalty and the Abbey community.
Yep, last shake, a bit like the last rites. But not with such a fatal outcome. When you think of what the girls go through, this is virtually nothing.
I think he's had quite a busy morning because there's been quite a few things, last-minute things he's had to sort out. But I imagine he's fine. He'll be absolutely fine. He's a pro. He does services all the time.
It does feel quite bizarre being on the other side, but it's kind of good for a priest to have that discipline, actually, you know? For us to remember what it's like for other people.
I spent quite a lot of time trying to get all the creases out my dress and out the veil, just sort of trying to steam it. We borrowed a steamer from the Abbey, which is helpful. Looking forward to having a little glass of champagne before we head off.
Unlike a lot of men, I actually quite like wearing a tie, and I sort of miss wearing a tie for formal things, actually. So I thought, do you know what? On my wedding day, I'm just going to wear an ordinary morning dress, a morning coat.
I'm really looking forward to getting there now. The butterflies are slightly swirling around my tummy. When we first talked about it, I did feel quite intimidated. But when the Abbey did the trip to Rome, I went with Jamie and the rest of the choir and the community that went out, and so that was great to get to know them even better. So actually I'm really looking forward to it. It's such a glorious place, and it's normally confined to royalty, and so we're very, very honoured to be getting married at the High Altar.
The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you.
And also with you.
It's wonderful to hear the skirl of the pipes here in Westminster Abbey, and it's glorious to be here on this happy and joyful day for the wedding of Carol and Jamie.
The Abbey community is an ever-expanding community. Those of us who work here know that we just come to play our part here for a very short space of time. We dip our toes in, we're fully immersed in it, and then we leave again. But today, the Abbey has gained another member of that community in Carol.
I've been experiencing that slightly on the fringes, but to be here now as a sort of legitimate part of the team is wonderful.
Over the coming months, the cycle of life at the Abbey continues.
You tend to forget from year to year just how little they are.
I've never slept at school before, so I'm a bit scared.
Christmas is obviously a beautiful and wonderful season, and for us, the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ is wonderful, and we have to prepare for it.
I like carols because they're all cheery, and it means Christmas is soon.